Welcome back to College Football Addiction. The third of our first four playoff games is done, and Texas beats Clemson by 14 points. A game that for much of the game was not that close, but a game that Clemson did fight back in. We'll talk about that. There were some more hot takes about this game, just like the first two that we talked about. We're saving all that for later, and we'll talk about that in another video. Just like we'll talk about the Indiana stuff, the SMU stuff, we'll include Clemson in there, and we'll talk about that big picture stuff later. But we do try to stick to football around here, not just hot takes or not just, whatever. We're going to break down the game. We're going to talk about the game from a big picture perspective later. Talk about the actual game here. A really nice opening drive by Clemson through the air. And something that I think if Clemson could have found more consistently through the middle parts of the game, this could have been a little bit different. Now, ultimately, I'll say this. I'm going to give Clemson maybe more love here because they were more competitive than either SMU or Indiana, so I'll talk about them a little bit more. But nothing here is meant to take away from Texas. Texas was the better team tonight. They were the more physical team. They made less mistakes. I thought, honestly, they were probably coached a bit better, and so all credit to Texas. They were the more talented team coming in. Did they maybe let their foot off the gas a little bit, or did Clemson they found some success to get it closer? This game was never in doubt from the Clemson perspective, from the Texas perspective. And so anything I say positive about Clemson, I am not taking away from Texas. Texas deserved to win this game. I think they're in the semifinal. We'll see. Don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I think they're in the semifinal. I think they've got a great shot to go and face who the heck knows at that point, right? At the time of this recording, the Tennessee-Ohio State game is just kicking off. I've got it paused inside, and so we'll find out that, and then obviously the winner of that will play Oregon. But I think Texas has a great chance to get to the semifinal. But a good opening drive by Clemson through the air, and then Texas answers back with a preview of what they would do all night. A nice opening drive on the ground by Texas. Here's where it got interesting. At 7-7, Clemson didn't go for it on 4th and 1. Now, ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, would this have changed the outcome of the game? I don't think so, but you don't know that, right? You don't know how a decision is going to change each and every moment down the stretch, or what may happen, or if, Texas tightens up a little bit more going down. Who knows, right? But Clemson not going for it on 4th and 1 there. At the end of the first quarter, he came, Dabo had Cade come out and try to draw him offside, but they let the clock expire. And to me, Clemson should have gone for that. You're a 2-touchdown dog on the road, and he had to know that his defense was not going to be able to stop Texas repeatedly. And I get it that at some point you're going to have to trust your defense, but to me, Clemson was going to win this game by scoring points. And on a 4th and 1, close to the 40, like you weren't within your 20 or on your 30 or anything, like you were close to midfield. I think you had to take that chance. 4 plays after they decided to punt, they were back at the same yard line from which Clemson would have gone for it on 4th down. And the very next play, 5 plays later, was a Texas touchdown to go up 14-7. Jaden Blue with his first of multiple touchdowns. And so all rushing that drive too for Texas. They were absolute monsters on the ground. And so I just wondered, man, if Dabo had it to do over again, if he had the hindsight, and it's a lot easier for me to sit on my couch or sit in a studio and say, oh, you should have gone for it, right? I understand those are tough decisions. But in that moment, I just felt like Clemson needed to score a lot of points to beat Texas. I loved the over in this game. The over cruised by and was really an easy call. And once you kind of saw the way that Texas's offense was going, you're like, man, this over is definitely going to hit. But I just didn't love that call. So they go up 14-7. Clemson drives again, right? Gets into field goal range. Cade takes a sack, gets them out of possible field goal range. They have to punt. Long bomb down the field, and another touchdown after that makes it 21-7. Cade throws a pick after it's tipped. Clemson does get a 4th down stop with 4 minutes to go in the half, but Clemson's not able to do anything. Then the pick 6 happens. I'll tell you, I hated this blindside block. I thought he hit the front of his shoulder. I thought he kind of got around him. I hate that call. I don't know what you're supposed to do as a defender in that situation. I had plenty of Texas fans replying to me on social media saying, yeah, I mean, we're glad we got that call, but that was kind of a weak call. I think there's a difference in a blindside block where you completely clean somebody's clock and take their head off. And what he did, I thought he got around the shoulder. Game could have changed there, right? Could have been 21-14. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that Texas was going to lose. That felt like a big play. Not only did they not get the touchdown, they only got a field goal to make it 21-10, and then Clemson kicks the ball out of bounds. And Texas goes down on a very good, very quick drive to make it 28-10 at the half. Texas, here's what the biggest part of the game to me. Texas comes out in the second half and uses 7 minutes of clock time and ran the ball at will, did whatever they wanted on the drive. They only got a 3, right? Clemson's defense did bow up to make it 31-10, but they used half the clock nearly. And so Clemson down 21 points, can't get anything going. Cade takes another sack, puts him behind the chains. Is actually almost the Jameis play where he tried to throw it. And fortunately, Clemson did get a stop on that. And a couple of nice passes, cuts it to 31-17 with a lot of time left. You get a 4th down stop, a pass that Quinn threw behind. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but I don't know why they went away from the running game. But you had a pass that was kind of behind the receiver, gives Clemson a short field. Maybe you should have kicked there. Maybe, who knows? But the play call was right. Execution really bad. Clemson goes and makes it a 1-score game, 31-24. And you're thinking, oh no, here come the Tigers. And immediately, Jaden Blue scores a touchdown, 77 yards. And that's pretty much it, right? You're up 2 scores. TJ Moore made some pretty insane catches to get it down inside the 20-yard line, down inside the 10. They got down to the 1, stopped on 4th down. That score would have made things a little more interesting. I don't think Texas would, you would have had to stop Texas twice, though. Even if you stopped them once and scored to tie it up, you'd have to stop them again. And I don't know that Clemson was going to stop them twice. So even if you'd have made it a little closer, you got in that 4th and 1 from the goal line, I still think Texas was winning this game. But Clemson, shout out to them for fighting back. I do think that that's important, right? That's a moral victory. That's such crap. Texas, as I said at the beginning, was the better team. They were the more physical team. They were coached better. They played better. Clemson did fight back. And this could have easily been SMU, Penn State, or Notre Dame, Indiana, which I know Indiana fought back in the last 5 minutes too. Obviously, way too little too late here. This wasn't too little too late. They had it down to a 1-score game with a chance to get back onto it, if not for the long blue run. And it just didn't make a lot of sense to me why Texas went away from the run. I don't know if Texas fans, if you're watching this, if you have thoughts on that, just casual fans that are watching this, if you have thoughts on that, but that was working so well. And it was almost like they were going to force Quinn into throwing the ball. I almost said Cade, almost said Arch. They were almost going to force Quinn into throwing the ball. And maybe that's just, okay, maybe I'll give you an answer. Maybe that's just Sark trying to get him ready for, obviously, he will have to pass the ball at some point if they're going to be successful, and he will have to do that well. And so maybe that was the thinking. But, man, against a really talented Clemson team that had, we talked about Clemson's wide receivers. We talked about how good they were. Against a team that's got that much talent, man, I think you just need to get out of there. If you're up by 20 against Arizona State in a week and a half, and you want to then try to force the passing for what that semifinal game will be, then do that. But against a team with the wide receivers and the offensive firepower and the weapons that Clemson has, I don't know that you want to be testing your passing game. So I didn't understand why Texas went away from the run. They went back to it, and obviously you got the 77-yard touchdown, and then obviously the run game is what salted the thing away. But, 292 rushing yards. They absolutely did whatever they wanted on the ground. They were very balanced. Quinn had 200 yards. He had 292 on the ground. I thought that was impressive. They were very, very balanced. Clemson, on the other hand, very one-dimensional. Cade passed for a ton of yards. In fact, Clemson passed for more yards against Texas than any other team this year. And Texas went up against a lot of guys that were preseason Heisman guys, right? You think about, you obviously went up against Beck 1.5 times. You went up against Dart. You went up against a lot of, not Dart, sorry. You went up against a lot of good quarterbacks in this league, and they weren't able to do this against you. And so shout out to Clemson for a pretty good passing attack. And they did a good job. However, they were incredibly one-dimensional. Nobody runs on that Texas front. Georgia had some success. So I think that you had to, by nature, pass, but I think they did a good job of that. They exploited the weakness on Texas's team, which is that secondary. And Clemson's wide receivers are going to be a problem for a long time. They're really, really good. Did Texas let their foot off the gas in this game? It's hard not to, right? When you're up by so much, when the game is essentially decided, again, it would have taken near perfect play for Clemson to end up finishing the comeback, right? Like, say they would have gotten on that 4th and 1, you'd have had to get another stop and then score, and then Texas would have had a chance with the game tied late to go down and score, or in overtime. Were you going to keep stopping? I mean, it would have taken a near perfect game. And so maybe it was a little bit of Sark going to the pass more than he should have. Maybe it was a little bit of Texas letting their foot off the gas. Either way, the game was fairly close. I talked about this in the SMU Penn State game. Even though that score wasn't very close, the total yardage in this game was 494 to 412. It wasn't insanely different. And obviously you think about Clemson had a long drive that got down to the 1 yard line and they didn't score. And then you have about an 80-yard difference. So yeah, 2 scores is essentially what you lost by. And so I thought that Clemson played, again, from kind of a down-to-down perspective, not as well as Texas, but fairly close. Like, Clemson gets 1 more yard on that 4th down. This is a 1-score game. And Texas was never really in danger of losing it by any means, but I thought Clemson played about as well as they could have in this one. Texas obviously has Arizona State next. That presents a very different challenge. Can Scadaboo actually run the way that they want to against this Texas defense? I'd be pretty shocked, just being fair. I think this Texas defense up front, their front 7 is spectacular. I thought Clemson's, on the other side, I thought Clemson's linebackers really struggled today. I thought the running game for Texas, I mean, just way too many arm tackles. The defense wasn't good for most of the game. They did get a few stops, but from Clemson, I got about it what I expected. I didn't expect the score to balloon as high as it did. I thought they'd be a little bit better offensively, a little bit more consistent offensively with the running back issues and how good Texas's front is. It doesn't surprise me that they weren't able to run the ball. But you were facing a team that was more talented than you, better coached than you, and not as one-dimensional. Right, Clemson is all Klubnik, right? And with Maffa hurt and some of the injuries they've had, that makes sense. I'm not trying to take away from Clemson, but Texas is the better team, and Clemson just couldn't. They were going to need some breaks. They were going to need some things to go their way. They were going to need, more of those tipped pass turnovers. They were going to need that pick 6 to actually count, right? And that gives them 4 more points. Maybe it's a little different if you get in the end zone. Who knows? But I do think that Texas kind of played, offensively, they were able to move the ball at will. And there were a couple of drives that Clemson got stops. They got stopped on a 4th and 1, too. I get it. But Texas just was so much better in this game. But I thought Clemson, shout out to Clemson. It was the closest game we've had so far, right? In 3 blowouts, kind of. And I know the Indiana-Notre Dame game finished at 10 points, but let's not pretend that wasn't an absolute dominating performance. I do think that Clemson fought better than anybody else had so far in this playoff. Now, I expect the Tennessee-Ohio State game to be even closer, but I do think that is, somewhat noteworthy. Like, Clemson could have let this thing get absolutely embarrassing. It was absolutely embarrassing at one point, and then you ended up losing by 14 to a team that's better than you, and you were in their home stadium. Again, I didn't think that the crowd was anything crazy. I wasn't there. Obviously, it's very easy for me to say that from my living room on my couch. But I didn't think that was a big intimidation factor. Obviously, weather, not an intimidation factor like it was up in the 3 games up north. But Texas, just better team, took care of business, maybe let their foot off the gas a little bit. But they probably are staring a semifinal appearance in the face, right? And then it's, can Texas win 2 games, right? I think they'll win against Arizona State. We're not there yet. I'm not trying to hate on Arizona State. I love Kenny Dillingham. Sorry, Texas fans. I like upsets. I'd love if Kenny Dillingham could pull the upset. I don't imagine it's going to happen. I don't see it happening. They open up as a pretty big dog to them. But Texas is looking a semifinal appearance in the face. And then it's 1 game away, right? 1 game away from the national championship to avenge those Georgia losses, to avenge all the talk of who has Texas beaten. Well, they beat a pretty good Clemson team tonight, and the game wasn't close. Is Clemson a great team? Is Clemson a championship level team? I don't think so. They were voted number 16. They're a top 20 team, and you dominated them the way you're supposed to. Are there things Texas can clean up? Absolutely. They certainly need to work on some of the secondary stuff, some of the breakdowns. They got, 10 days to get that done. And so there's time. Texas certainly has some things they need to clean up, some things they need to fix, but they look like one of the better teams in the country. When you look at Notre Dame, Penn State, and Texas, I don't know that there's a clear that team is better than everyone else, right? That team played the best from those first 3 games. And so I think this thing is still as wide open as it was. You've got 2 teams in the quarterfinals that I think are going to struggle in Boise State and Arizona State. And so you've got 2 teams in the quarterfinals that I think are really good in Georgia and Oregon. And then I think you got 3 teams that won this weekend so far that are also really good. So right now you've got 7 teams alive, and then 1 more that you'll add. I think those 8 teams are the best 8 teams. Obviously, we've had some lopsided results. But I do think that the teams that we're thinking about, the 6 teams, the 2 that are there and the 4 that are moving on tonight, those 6 teams are the best 6 teams. We probably could have been fine with a 6-team playoff this year and gotten the same result. But we'll see. That's why you got to go play the game. I'm not saying that SMU I'm not saying that Boise State or Arizona State can't win. I just don't know that I would project it just yet. So what are your thoughts, Texas fans? How pleased are you? Did the Clemson comeback worry you at all? I really wouldn't be too worried about that. Teams are going to fight. Teams are going to try and get back in it. They did their very best. They weren't able to. And I still don't think, even if they'd have tied it up, I still think Texas was finding a way to win this game. They were just that much better. Shout out to Clemson for fighting back, making the game somewhat entertaining. The second half made it a little bit more enjoyable than the second halves of the other games. But Texas absolutely looks like they could compete and win a national title. And they were very businesslike tonight. That's what Sark talked about after the game. It was very businesslike. They went out and took care of business. Were they perfect? No. Do they look like a team that can win it all? Absolutely. Quinn needs to play a little bit better. Secondary needs to be a little bit better. They still dominated this game for all intent and purposes. So thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you guys for watching. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll talk to you soon on College Football Addiction.